Hello everyone. I would like to talk about today a topic that is distant. And to give you a sense of this distance, think of it as far as another galaxy and as far as your origin story or your beginning spark of existence. When we look at reality, we are confronted by different projections of it and probabilities and possibilities. So the mind of man naturally brings himself on a paved path to see that even though we have reduced the level of just unconscious expression to more of a conscious expression. So in other words, in our mind where we reduce things to make them smaller so we can think of big ideas, those ideas are actually not big. You look at a tree and its intelligence is a natural drawn intelligence where the fruit, before it comes into action, is actually already part of the design of the tree. So the way our memory and our thought and our awareness is flowing is actually natural design. But here is where it gets a bit exciting. Because we see that man is stuck in a sense of a game. So you cannot ignore objective reality and your immediate interpretation of it is a game. Because there's a cause and effect required. When there's a cause and effect principle, immediately the reality shifts into one where there is double observance, which makes two eyes that see the same. By double, I mean there's two polarities, you see the best version of you and the worst version of you, and there's infinite versions there. Similar to how certain fractions never end. So, as you bring this into your understanding, you see that your intelligence is only isolated to recognize itself. And once it recognizes itself, it goes in an awareness that it can't ignore. So what that means is after you reach a peak of human experience or a peak of experience in a certain way, your mind opens up in extraordinary ways. And what that means is you have observed the ordinary to such a peak that every moment of your presence here is bringing you such intricate images of infinite change. And what that means is that you can adjust your intensity at first. So what happens is through meditation, me personally, I learned how to adjust intensities of my experience. So I could sit down and take myself into a very intense experience to a point that the thoughts deconstructed a sense of self, so I was, in a sense, out of body because there was no bodies, but intelligence continued and I was comfortable with it. So I saw that the mind of man deconstructs itself in an instant the minute it remembers it was never where it was. So let's say in a reality, in a unified field, the part is as particular as it is kept. So what I mean by that is that physical reality in front of us right now is being kept by a greater attention that is existentially within our own attention to ourselves. And in a sense, as the gates of madness close for the gates of gentleness to open, you see that madness is part of gentleness. The silent Zen master who sat down and did not move in a sense that he was left untouched by life. So he was such a presence that no amount of anger or anything could affect his mind. So that means there were certain beings here on this plane of existence that know themselves based on unlocking their memory by a certain life experience, that they remember how they even know themselves from different spaces and times. And what that means is different co-creations which our memories are connected to. So you see, when the individual discovers a collective, the game is changed. in the sense that it's immediately stopped. So the person before, let's say, a life experience happens, and the person after that life experience, they're two different people. The soldier that hasn't been to war and the soldier who's been to war are two different people, because their attention and their memory and who they are, in a sense, this lit candle is in a sense, it's keeping them focused on other identities that are identifying the person. You need to be able to transcend your identity if you want to touch a greatness beyond man. So in other words, once you're done thinking of what's the greatest idea man can do, think of what is the greatness peak of man and beyond man. And if all this was being presented and perceived in an instant, in a moment, who is here? And when deep questions enter your life, they are like gentle teachers. They come around you and they sit and they don't say anything. The deep question watches you. And so you see, the people who ask deep questions, the people who actually long and search for something passionately, are always rewarded with the compassion of a greater observance, allowing them through. So you see, I want you to visualize yourself not as just who you are right now, but I want you to visualize yourself as a movement. And as a movement is moving in greater movements, its direction is automatically the rotation of the earth. The orbits that orbit man's mind. You will see that your sincerity and your sense of honesty will polish your mirror to show you greater aspects of your own design. But if you're too convinced by external reality of your internal reality, then you cannot even step on the first step of moving beyond axiom and postulate. And kind of what I mean by that is that you are still looking for a foundation to place your idea on comfortably, but it is not something like that. It is not a game. Life is a game in a sense, but it's the awareness to life is not a game. The awareness to life is actually something that, in my experience, of course, does not need language to communicate. So think of all of us right now on a field. Every listener to this talk, every viewer on a huge field. Now visualize all of us suddenly hearing some news and reacting, and suddenly people are panicking, just as they normally would. So you begin panicking as you do. And I just want you to see that if there was someone on top of a building watching all of this, he would wonder, where is the intelligence in this design? But he would see that one aspect, one person, is not panicking, is not creating distracting imagery based on the past for their present, is actually present enough to see that when someone freaks out, when one person confronts the apocalypse in their mind, it is an individuation that is irrelevant to you because it is just for that individuation, but it does not still mean it's separate. So the concept of individuality cannot be talked about because you will experience it as you shift, as you heat up your excitement for the moment. Therefore, in the calmness of a clear mind, we perceive that when we confront life in the moment, we give ourselves a chance to observe everything from the top of the building, from above, to see if some of our actions are useless or not. And you see, this is actually, in a sense, we can say, a beginning attempt to, in a way, explain intuition, not in terms of, I guess, scientific ways, but in terms of experience. So I am here someone simply communicating experience, and my experience. You see, once you stop ignoring something and saying, this is not me, this is not me, this is not me, you begin to actually look at it and see that your immediate ideas of something not having value is wrong. Everything has value because the value is in the eye of the beholder. It is in the eye of he who brings the item value. And in the culture and society we live now, the concept of value is confused because there has been an evaluation that we can look through but not see anything. Visualize yourself having a sense of knowing before you go through an experience. If you follow that sense of knowing, you will see, you will only truly and clearly be able to perceive and understand it through your highest creative expression. So through suddenly, a wind of wonder hit you and you suddenly became so excited about your life and so involved and so joyous and so blissful in your experience, you would see life is different. There have been people who have been able to put away their bad habits. And there have been people who have been able to put away even their senses of self. And so to function in realities where their knowing is aligned based on different principles. It is the tiger's growl that reminds us where we are. And so find your tiger's growl and you will see that once you're able to no longer fight the tiger, but be present in front of it, your presence is its own communication, and so fear cannot be present. So what that means is that you can have your attention on an idea to such an extent where you are having a subtler experience of it based on the physical frame of the imagery you're seeing or the memory you're aware of. The mind needs to be spoken about because the more we speak about it, the more we see that we're not limited to this range. We're not limited to the limitations that we conceive. This is the point in your life where you're recognizing that you're the point all lines go through. And when you understand this, I hope the geometry of how you think about yourself or how you're even aware of things changes, because your experience is what inspires you to move on. We are beings who value experience, but we don't understand it, so we have ignored it and covered it with other attempts to try to find a sense of happiness. When you seek happiness, you're seeking your own ability to give yourself permission to see that there is no such thing as just happiness and, the opposite. Your state of being has nothing to do with your circumstance, and that's why you can leave that state of being. That is why you can shift out of it. That is why an angry man can calm himself, and in the right times, a calm man can demonstrate the intensity of an anger which no one has to say anything about, even Zeus's psychiatrist. Because the anger which suddenly is also a glove for the hand of existence to communicate or release something, in a sense, through you, as you, with you, and eventually in you, you see that your ability to perceive yourself is a transparent emanation that by its mere presence is simply the totality of why you're here. So an experience of presence answers all your questions because it shows you a nature, a sensitivity of life that cannot ask anymore. It needs to walk, it needs to climb that mountain. So when you have that longing, if think of those people on Boxing Day, and they have this intention, they have this longing, just like Lord of the Rings, to go and get that thing. Get that task done, get that DVD or, whatever. Get that huge TV. And you see that the way they go through it is because they see it doesn't matter how you value your life. It matters how much of the value of your life you're seeing. That's what's important. And you see that how that comes about is at the end of ends, a new beginning. What do you find at the end of your end? Of your end and end and end and end? Well, I went to the end and end and end, and there was a moment where I was at the end, and suddenly reality crumbled. There was nothing. There was an emptiness before even they could even draw the blueprint of this cosmos. And while I was there in that emptiness, I got bored. And I began applying my creativity, and I realized that our mind needs to feel empty to then have senses of fulfillment. So you need to allow yourself to very clearly absorb those experiences in your life which have been hard or painful, or just it's pointed to some kind of suffering, and in a sense see that within those experiences, life has provided you with an experience that has given you the certain sensitivity of spectrum in regards to how reality works. So the way you feel reality works right now is valuable, not to anyone else but you, until you see that you reach the peak of the value and you're seeking for the next treasure, and the treasure revealer is constantly looking for the revelation and sees that there is no revelation. And that is the actual revelation. When the seer sees that there is no such thing as seeing, it is simply that the sight is present if it needs be. So the seer or the shaman or the rishi or the yogi or the mystic began to experience through his certain practice or certain focus a different sensitivity of reality, and hence through that was expansively opened to very omniscient views of self, in the sense that we're in the world and at the same time not here. In the sense that all religions point to a God that is within everything. And so you find that the silence is truly the answer you seek. Because once you see the suffering you have been creating mentally by thinking so I guess in a sense firmly and in a sense in an agitated way, you know, I guess in a sense of stress and depression, when you have these feelings in you, your mind will climb that hill, which is in a sense a recovery from your own sense of destruction. So, okay, let me see how I could say this smoothly. Let us take a caterpillar on a branch. And so let's say you just fast forward my talk and you suddenly see that the caterpillar is in a cocoon. When we see that we meditate, when you sit down by the grass, a sort of atmosphere presents itself that shows a kind of metamorphosis, if I'm saying this right. But in a sense, what happens is that you first look at who you are, man. You just look at what you are. Immediately you have a still point of a clear view. So it's fine. You're not trying to get rid of ideas. You're not trying to do something. You're not trying to do something because all that is doing is just creating an idea and you're not getting an outcome. What you want to do is not actually create an idea, but to see. And when you see, you don't want to communicate. You actually want to be the communication. You don't want to be a terminal. You want to be the experience of the communication. So similarly, when we still the body, when we still the mind, when our eyes continue to remain closed while they're still open, in that range of experience, we are more able to look at our thoughts and to experience a greater understanding. When you look at the design of man's biology, you cannot ignore a sense of holistic process, in the sense that if those cells are in a greater body, then could the sun that I see be the pupil of a bigger eye? And so when you have these thoughts and these moments, you see that in your gentleness, you have provided a platform for your ability to just observe any idea but not to be engaged in it. So at times the certain things that I talk about, you see that they're intense, but the engagement is not that intense, you know? So think of it this way. Your past is your present being created in a way where you're acknowledging change through a structured step. And so the handling of the handles of time is a method where one is stepping out of the jacuzzi on a very cold, windy day. Your system will look at itself in a way in which your consciousness experiences itself in a spacious manner, so you're suddenly free and you're no longer bothered by any physical process or mental process. Let your experiences teach you of the growth that you can be self-aware of in the moment always. Sometimes if you have a question from life, you see you have one option: to go into the library and do the best research project you can. Or another way is to find a position, find a memory, or find some thought, or actually to stop actually thinking and look in the present and just try to see how feelings of starting things feel to you. How acts of starting things feel to you, how the acts of stopping feels to you, how the act of changing feels to you, how the act of observing all these three, similar to a triangle, to all be the same shape. To then see all shapes were natural design. To see that all natural design was part of a greater vision. To see that vision in a way that creation has become creator. There is no longer a vision of creation. So once you step out of polarity, there are no poles to hold on to. I hope in this talk, guys, you realize that your ability has nothing to do with what you think in the past. Your ability is a new thing which you don't know, and the greatest state you can be in receiving that gift is one of wonder, gratefulness, and compassion and excitement. Have these ideas around you as companions. The way I do is I walk with great ideas. And you need to see, guys, man is most certain right now about the human form. So when you look at deep ideas, you will see that you will have similar relationships with your thoughts in contexts where they have an imaginative intelligence, as if your imagination on its own is refabricating your memory to adjust with your level of playfulness in the present moment. So how you are being pointed to by existential attention is actually how everything is directed into itself to then reproject. So therefore, once the eyes of a dying man close, there is nothing to see other than life, other than other potentialities and abstracts of reality, if needed to be kept. We are man, and we are seeing that the way we change humanity is by increasing and making every human being a compassionate and powerful existential communicator, in the sense that they are not speaking, but they are the harmony of their environment. They are the collective which their individual or their individuated sense of self has always needed. Much blessings, guys. And be the collective your individual needs. Namaste.